Before the walks, nobody was talking about the missing and murdered women. And our families, the family members right across the nation, were in their own pain, in their own little world. There was nobody doing anything about it. They thought nobody cared.
Tonight, we take you on part of Gladys Radek's journey across the country in the days leading up to the release of the final report of the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
All those that have struggled to promote peace and reconciliation, it's for them.
And esteemed honors for Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild.
Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We've got breaking news out of Ottawa tonight. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls releases its final report on Monday. APTN has obtained a copy of that report. In it, the Commission calls the epidemic of violence against Indigenous women and girls a Canadian genocide. Indigenous people have long used the term to describe Canada's treatment of First Nations, Inuit and Métis people. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said the Canadian Residential Schools program was cultural genocide. The Canadian Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg refused to use that word when it opened in 2014, but it now describes the entire colonial experience from first contact to today as genocide. Tune in to APTN Monday morning, begin at 9 a.m. Eastern for our live coverage of the inquiry's official release of that report. For over a decade, one northern British Columbia woman has been an advocate and a representative for families of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs followed Gladys Radek as she gets ready for her very last cross-Canada trip. Here's her story.
On the side of the road, it just reminds me of little crosses, because there's so many family members that are missing, and who knows if they're thrown into those bushes.
Daughters, mothers, sisters, aunties, grandmas, and friends. Gladys Radek has been fighting for all of those taken along the infamous Highway of Tears in northern British Columbia.
When we walk through the country, throughout the country, those spirits are still in there. I can feel them.
She's seen the country, literally, one step at a time.
Before the walks, nobody was talking about the missing and murdered women. And our families, the family members right across the nation, were in their own pain, in their own little world. There was nobody doing anything about it. They thought nobody cared.
A well-known advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, she has walked from BC to Ottawa 7 times. But it's the end of the road, her very last cross-Canada trip. She's getting ready to drive from Terrace, BC to Gatineau, Quebec to witness the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls deliver their final report. And APTN is joining her on this road trip. We start bright and early at her house in Terrace. There's over 110 photos to tape on her car. It all started with one, her niece Tamara Chipman, who went missing from Prince Rupert in 2005. A year later, Radek started the Tears for Justice March. She didn't have any money or a vehicle.
When do we want it? Now!
But she did have momentum as families walked alongside, supporting each other.
What we did was far beyond any organization or, paid government employees. I think what we did came from our hearts, and I think that was more meaningful than anything else, because we didn't need to have government funding to do this. We relied on our people.
Gladys has inspired her community, and with that, there's many people to say goodbye to before heading out, including her sister Lorna Brown, who lives nearby and has also been an MMIWG advocate for years.
Lorna's always been my go-to gal in this family because she believes in me.
We want to invite different people out and so that they can actually hear the stories, they can hear, I mean, I think people hear about this in the news, but then it's really, it's uncomfortable.
Radek says there's a lot on the line when she gets to Gatineau.
I've been anxious actually for the last month or so, anticipating what's going to happen, and also realizing that this is closing the circle, it's closing that gap that I set out to do back in 2008.
You guys want to make your way over there?
Before the inquiry, families only had each other to rely on.
When we were doing our walks, we went through a lot of emotions because we were all family members. And I think for me, meeting all those family members was probably the best thing that could happen to me in my life.
Gladys has a lot to reflect on before the trip. Her years of advocacy have been rife with lateral violence, something that could even take place at the final report.
I chalk it off as some of us are at different stages of healing. Sometimes it gets to me, but on the other times I think about my families. I think about the families that I know and what would they do if I decided to quit.
One last stop to grab an important item to bring to the inquiry.
Good old water from Prince Rupert, BC.
Her son-in-law has helped with many of Radek's walks. And while he can't go with her on this road trip, he is hopeful that one important truth is echoed in Gatineau.
People think that the girl went missing because she was into drugs or whatnot. Well, she went missing because somebody made a choice to kill her. She went missing because somebody made a choice to murder her and leave her somewhere.
It's time to go. 5,000 miles, her last trip to hear recommendations, including her own, on how to end violence against Indigenous women. And Radek is ready.
How long do you think you'll keep fighting?
Till I die. This is something that you can't just throw it away.
Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Terrace.
It's time for us to take a quick break, but we've got more news coming after tomorrow's weather.
Off to the east coast. We've got 22 in sunshine in Fredericton, 7 in rain in St. John's. 12 in cloud in Happy Valley Goose Bay, 7 in sunny in Inukjuak. 14 in Val-d'Or, sunshine, 21 in sunny in Montreal, 16 in Gaspe. Sarnia's rain and 24, 15 in sunshine in Sault Ste. Marie. 15 in rain in Sioux Lookout, 16 in rain in Thunder Bay. 2 in snow in Churchill, 13 in sunshine in Norway House. 14s for Barons River and Princess Harbour and some cloudy skies, sunny and 19 in Brandon. 28 in sunshine in Swift Current, 21 in sunny in Yorkton. 16 in sunshine in Uranium City, 20 in sunny in Buffalo Narrows, 23 in sunshine in Meadow Lake.
Welcome back. Over 1,000 people are expected to be evacuated from Pikangikum First Nation today as a forest fire just kilometers from the community has been burning out of control since Wednesday. Willow Fiddler brings us the latest.
The chief of Pikangikum says the evacuation of 1,600 community members is much more organized today. But there are now reports the burning fire has taken down telephone and internet lines in Pikangikum and several neighboring communities. About 230 evacuees were flown to Thunder Bay on Thursday, the last plane landing around midnight. At first, it wasn't clear if the Canadian Forces Hercules aircraft could land in Pikangikum, forcing hundreds of elders, children, and families to wait at the airport for hours. Mark Atkinson was one of the first to be evacuated. He was taken to Thunder Bay with his wife Marcella, who is on dialysis, and their 3-year-old son Keegan.
Yeah, I was working at the airport when I seen the fire start. It was already going at around 2:30, and it just continued on throughout the day and the night. And yesterday it was very smoky, very smoky.
The remaining 1,300 or so evacuees are being flown to Sioux Lookout, then transported to other host communities like Cochrane and Timmins. The forest fire next to the community of about 4,000 people became a threat on Wednesday afternoon. By Wednesday night, the chief declared a state of emergency and began preparing for evacuations.
It's absolutely horrifying. You know, you could actually hear the roar of the fire.
Atkinson is hoping they'll be reunited with their 3 other sons who were between the ages of 7 and 13. They had to leave them behind with his wife's family.
And how are you feeling about them being back there and you're here?
Not sure. Just want them to be here.
As of Friday afternoon, the fire grew in size to about 3,000 hectares. The province says air and ground fire crews continue to battle the blaze.
The aerial fire suppression is assisting the crews to establish hose lines on the northwest corner of the fire under some fairly difficult conditions. As well, they have values protection going on at key infrastructure sites south of the fire.
According to the province, the wind is keeping smoke away from the community, but clear weather conditions are making it challenging to get it under control.
You know, rain certainly is is always a great turnaround. You know, luckily in the region we've had a fairly high hazard over the last couple days, but not a lot of other fire starts.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
The NDP was on the campaign trail in Montreal today. Jagmeet Singh and his party constituents were in tow to reveal the NDP's Canadian New Deal ahead of the fall election. They call it a bold plan that Singh believes will address the imminent climate crisis. If elected, Singh promises the NDP will launch a retrofit program to ensure that Canadian homes comply with low carbon emission standards by 2050. He also says he plans to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuel industry and reinvest in renewable technology. But an effective fight against climate change requires treating Indigenous people as equal partners in decision making, he said.
Respecting treaty rights, respecting their land, and most importantly, making sure we put into place the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That declaration is a framework for how we can move forward as partners and make sure that we're working together for this common goal of fighting climate change.
A longtime Indigenous rights advocate, lawyer, and sports ambassador receives a recognition in Ottawa. Chief Wilton Littlechild is this year's recipient of the Pearson Peace Medal. The award is given to those who show outstanding contributions to the global community. Littlechild was a commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He also helped establish the North American Indigenous Games and the World Indigenous Games.
This is not an individual designation, but I accept it on behalf of all of our peoples across Canada, all those that have struggled to promote peace and reconciliation. It's for them.
We've got more news coming. We have to take another commercial break. Here's the rest of tomorrow's weather.
In northern Alberta, we've got 26 and sunshine in Peace River, 25 mix of sun and cloud in Grand Prairie, 28 and sunny in Edmonton and Red Deer and Lethbridge, 26 and sunshine in Calgary, 24 and sunny in Campbell River, 32 and sunshine in Kamloops, 18 and cloudy in Fort Nelson, 23 and sunshine in Prince George, cloud and 13 in Dawson City, 10 and cloud in Whitehorse, 16 with a mix of sun and cloud in Norman Wells, 16 and cloudy in Trout Lake, Paulatuxin at clear skies and 5 degrees, Sax Harbor clear and 1, -1 in snow in Cambridge Bay, 1s for Chesterfield, Whale Cove and Arviat, cloudy skies, Clyde Rivers 3 with mostly sunny skies, 7 and sunshine in Iqaluit. Clean drinking water is a right everyone should have access to, but not everybody does. Annery Dave is the winner of the Create Your Canada contest. It encourages high school students to submit policy ideas. Currently, there are about 78 Indigenous communities under boil water advisories. NDP MP Linda Duncan is going to bring Dave's idea as a motion to the House of Commons. Duncan will urge the government to commit to the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act.
When I saw just how extreme it was, I just truly was shocked, because I don't think I ever really understood how deep rooted it was. I've known for a while that there was, some issues with reaching to communities farther, but I never knew that it was so widespread until I really started looking into it and uncovered that it was affecting a lot of communities.
You may have seen Indigenous chef David Wolfman on APTN's Cooking with the Wolfman show. Recently, he took his food skills to the classroom in Thunder Bay, where he challenged students at Dennis Franklin Cromartie to turn up the heat. Willow Fiddler was there.
Bring the home team in.
It's a cooking challenge that may sound familiar. Contestants have 60 minutes to prepare an appetizer with selected ingredients and one secret ingredient. The contestants are teams of students from Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School and Pelican Falls First Nations High School. They've been prepped by Indigenous chef David Wolfman. You might recognize him from the APTN television show Cooking with the
Wolfman. We're going to see who
Wolfman.
wins. And one of the important things about a competition like this is not what they, if they win or lose. Of course, it's nice to win, but it's what they take away. And I think it's really important for these kids to take these skills, and it's a skill that they'll always have. So that's one great thing. So
With the clock ticking, the teams are all fired up.
This is for the base. Then we're going to put this spread on there, which is made from. We also know that Candy likes to cook. You smell some of the meals he's made for us at home.
Mustard, balsamic vinegar, olive oil, an onion,
And
celery.
the secret ingredients in there too. We have lemon juice in there too
Lemon
as
juice,
well.
lime, juice with lime.
And then after that, we're going to be putting the chicken on there for the protein.
22 minutes, guys, 22 minutes.
And we might be crunching up peanuts, roasting it and putting it on top for the crunch.
But it's not long before things get heated and the teams are put to the test.
This is a non-stick pan, and a non-stick pan doesn't have it isn't magnetized at the bottom, so it doesn't work on this induction cooker. It doesn't heat up on the sides or anything.
In the end, both teams stepped up to the plate and delivered. And it's up to the judges to decide the outcome. But win or lose, these teams came together.
It was kind of fun to be doing that again, but like at the end of like us yelling at each other, we were still laughing and all, and it was still fun to run around and test out things like tasting and everything.
It's part of the success the schools are seeing with their new culinary program.
And some of them had actually returned to their communities on holiday breaks and been selling pies and stuff and taking these skills back to their communities, which is what we were kind of hoping they would do.
It's also helping students like Kakakayash prepare for their future.
And I think I want to do this for a career. After I'm graduating this year, but I'm coming back next year.
Marie Mikas also wants to pursue culinary arts after high school. She says her inspiration comes from watching her mom in the kitchen.
Making food for people to enjoy, and different colors, adding different tastes and everything. And yeah, it just brings joy to me seeing other people eating my food I made.
Wolfman said the students can use their culinary skills back home or to travel around the world.
It's part of our culture, you know. Our culture is sharing food, right? And every event you go to, whether it's a celebration of some type or a harvest, it's always about food. And so it's important that people in our community learn those skills and take them to the next level.
O'Connor said they plan to expand the culinary program to include confectionery arts next year. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Food stories at this time of day are always tough to watch sitting behind the desk here. A new film festival is launching in Vancouver. It's called the Skoden Festival. Skoden is, of course, a term used coast to coast. It's the slang for let's go. APTN's Chris McIntyre met up with the two university students who started this festival to find out what Skoden is all about.
Skoden is a one-day film festival featuring the works of British Columbia-based Indigenous filmmakers and talent. Films can range from the professional to the high school student with an iPhone. Skoden was started by Car Sapier and Grace Matheson, two Simon Fraser University film students at the School for Contemporary Arts.
We were talking about SFU and reconciliation and what they see for the future, and like they're like seem to be talking about things like that, but there's never really no action towards it. And Grace, being in the student union, was like, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I was just like, I've always wanted to do a film festival, and because like that would be including like the community, including the school, like. And she's like, okay, let's do it.
festival goers will be able to attend 2 short film programs and special events, celebrating Indigenous voices and cultivating more active discussions about reconciliation.
I think something that I'm excited about too, especially on the day of the festival, is hearing other people's ideas for what reconciliation is to them.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's also just a good way to get a great gathering of people together.
Yeah.
Vancouver-based filmmaker Justin Ducharme is no stranger to film festivals, and he was happy to be part of this event.
You can come and learn about an experience that isn't necessarily yours, and maybe take something away from that, and change your mind about perceptions that you have towards, whether it's towards Indigenous people or whether it's towards Indigenous cinema. I think that there's room for us to educate folks and to share space with our community.
Cara and Grace will soon be graduating, and their plans after school are said to take them into different directions. But the Skoden Indigenous Film Festival will always be in their hearts.
They were kind of like building the foundation, and then like next year people can build on that, and then just find the festival's voice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Vancouver.
APTN Investigates returns tonight with an all-new episode. Video journalist Cullen Crozier looks into the use of solitary confinement in Canadian prisons. He joins us now from our Yellowknife Bureau. What made you want to investigate the use of solitary confinement?
Yeah, well, basically, I'd done some research in past seasons on the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the criminal justice system. And I found that they were also overrepresented in segregation as well. I think today they sit around 40%. So 40% of inmates in federal prison in segregation today are Indigenous. So basically, that's kind of what started the idea. I just wanted to kind of look at those numbers, kind of find out, you know, why they're overrepresented and what's happening since.
And what are some of the issues surrounding solitary confinement that you've explored in this documentary?
Yeah, well, basically, it's the fact that a lot of the Indigenous inmates that are in segregation today, they're not just staying in segregation for, you know, a couple days or, you know, maybe a week or whatever. They're actually staying in there for months, years, and there doesn't really seem to be any mechanism to get out of the system once they're inside. So those are some of the big issues that are facing Indigenous people, Indigenous inmates in the criminal justice system, is just, you know, how are they getting in the system and how, you know, how can they eventually get out?
Is the government planning to change anything surrounding solitary confinement?
Yeah, the government last year they announced this Bill C-83, where they were going to eliminate the use of segregation altogether, and they were going to bring in this new system called structured intervention units. So inmates are going to be allowed out of their cell for 4 hours a day as opposed to 2, more access to programs, services. But a lot of the critics that I've been speaking with have said that, you know, it's essentially rebranding, and that 4 hours outside of a cell instead of 2 is still solitary confinement.
Well, thank you for taking the time to give us a little preview of what we can expect with your documentary right after tonight's news. Thanks so much, Cullen.
Thanks, Melissa.
That is all the news I have for you this Friday, the last day of May. Stick around now for APTN Investigates Buried Alive, looking at solitary confinement and Indigenous prisoners. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.